Introduction. How rich? What's $1,000? Mere chicken feed, a poultry matter? This is a thinnish book with a heftyish price, but a price probably worth paying for those who absolutely, positively, even desperately wish to be rich. Not super rich, mind you, not filthy, stinking rich. This book cannot assist anyone who aspires to the Bill Gates or Duke of Westminster leagues. No book can do that, and that is not a concern here. Bill's vast fortune, I would suggest, did not arise simply from the implementation of good ideas or the fulfillment of any single vision. It derives from deep within Bill Gates, and we will come on to that later. The Duke, of course, inherited his massive fortune. Today, he is apparently worth the best part of Euro 5 billion. His job is to safeguard that fortune for succeeding generations of dukes, especially from the predations of greedy tax collectors and spendthrifts governments. I do not envy him such a task. It must be very work, laboring for descendants he will never meet. The Duke, then, is massively asset rich and relatively cash poor. Relatively mind. No pun intended. We will come on to that later in this chapter. Relative wealth is a fascinating subject. No, this book is about becoming one of the common or garden rich, world class footballer rich, or J.K. Rowling rich, or rich enough to stop looking at the price of almost anything that takes your fancy, rich enough to retire or to work 18 hours a day or drink yourself into oblivion every night, if that's what you want. Rich enough to smile sweetly or sneer at bank managers depending on what you had for breakfast that morning, to turn your relatives green with poorly concealed jealousy while they creep around with their hands out, rich enough to buy a massive yacht. I don't advise it though, and sail away into the sunset like the owl and the pussycat for years on end. Rich enough to live where you want, to go where you want, and to do what you want, to meet who you want. Rich enough to buy the only two things apart from health and love worth fussing about in life: time and the option of not having to be in any particular place or any particular day doing any particular thing in order to pay the rent or the mortgage, and rich enough to begin to worry about taxes, to begin the process of employing that vast army of lawyers, accountants, advisors, and estate planners who will descend upon you to uninvited vultures after a battle. A group to whom, even though you pay them tens and thousands of pounds a year, you will be forever in thrall. The large yacht and the sailing away plan is looking better than by the minute, isn't it? Certainly rich enough for people to respect you, but in a peculiar way. Not in the way we respect people who do really tough, worthwhile jobs, those who nurse dying children or teach for a living, and certainly not the respect earned by heroines and heroes like Marie Curie or Nelson Mandela. Money in sufficient quantities garners a different kind of respect for its owner, a different rooted in the nature of envy. Few of us have the courage to nurse dying children or to spend decades in prison fighting tyranny. And we do not envy those who can do such things, even as we look up to them. On the other hand, nearly all of us want money. We feel free to envy the rich, and most of us believe, rightly or wrongly, that we would be perfectly able to cope with the pressures associated with acquiring too much money. The more thoughtful among us might conclude that we would be able to do a lot of good with it, as well as making ourselves and our family secure. Ask yourself this: is there a single person of your acquaintance you could be certain without refuse a bequest of euro 10 million? Personally, I cannot, and I'm willing to bet you can't either. So, how rich is rich? The value of money changes inexorably over time. Even in the decades and centuries of low inflation, economists and historians now have so many methods of evaluating the comparative worth of money over long periods that the exercise has become virtually meaningless to all but specialists, meaningless because of the changes in the quality and range of goods available. the earning power of immediate and foreign neighbors, the importance or otherwise of the preservation of ancestral assets like land and art, and a host of other factors. So let's ignore all that and plump for purchasing power in the last quarter of a century as a rough and ready guide. Since 1980, the purchasing power of $1 million in the US has decreased by more than half. In Britain, the purchasing power euro 1 billion million in 1980 has decreased by over 60%. To put it another way, euro 7,60,000 in hard cash back in 1980 would equate to the spending power of euro 2 million today. While you might not even have been a millionaire technically back then, you would have certainly have been the equivalent of one by today's standards. So how rich is rich in the first decade of the 21st century? The following table is based on the tax paid cash in band or assets that can be swiftly reduced to cash. Publicly traded stocks and shares, bank drafts, gold, etc. It takes no account of assets that take time to realize without incurring loss in a fire sale, your home, property, land, shares held in private companies, pension funds, or fixed bonds. It also assumes you have low debt and live in a Western democracy. Table 1, wealth measured by cash in hand or quickly realizable assets. So, euro 50,000 to euro 2 lakh, the comfortable poor. Euro 2 lakh to euro 5 lakh is the comfortable off. Euro 5 lakh to euro 1 million is the comfortable off. 1 euro 1 million to euro 5 million is comfortable off. Euro 5 million to euro 15 million, euro 15 million to euro 35 million is the comfortably wealthy. Euro 35 million to euro 50 million, euro 50 million to 100 million, euro over euro 100 million, that is comfortably rich and the rich, the seriously rich, the truly rich, and the filthy rich, and the super rich. Note to the table 1, there are few people in the world who could put their hands on euro 100 million in cash in a week or even a month. No matter what they are worth, such people have too much respect for their fortune to leave that kind of change floating around in quick realized assets or cash. In addition, the reduction of any asset to cash very often leads to the imposition of capital gains tax, the equivalent of the Black Death to the truly rich. If I had to find that kind of money, I would have to borrow it and then sell assets to repay the debt. As far as the total assets value or true net worth of a person is concerned, as opposed to quickly realizable net worth, the numbers are very different. And different for a variety of reasons, partly because of capital gains tax and other levies, partly because death leads to death duties, partly because of planned inheritance schemes and donations to trusts and charities, and mostly because few rich people can know their true net worth until all their major assets are sold off. It sounds crazy, but the richer you are and more financial advisors you employ, the less likelihood there is that you can ever discover that you are really worth. It's a nice person to have, it's a nice problem to have, but it is still a problem. This is why so many rich people distrust the rich lists and league tables of wealth published every so often in newspapers and magazines. We know that if we cannot calculate our true net worth, and if we are paid armies of accountants cannot agree upon a figure, then compilers of lists and financial journalists certainly cannot do so with any real accuracy. In the words of the art collectors and oil billionaire John Paul Getty, if you can actually count your money, you cannot really a rich man. A final caveat concerning the total asset value of rich individuals is almost as obvious. Above a certain limit, it doesn't really matter to them how rich they are. Given or take the odd miser and the odd 100 million, that is, it ceases to matter unless you are one of the intended hires. Then it matters. Boy, does it matter. You might be surprised at the number of wealthy individuals who die without proper tax planning or even intestate. A fancy way of saying that someone has died without a legally enforceable will in place. It is this intestate estates that so please the Chancellor of the Exchequer and his minions. If you die without a legally enforceable will, chances are the taxman will gobble up a great deal of what you have left behind. The next table then shows my take on a person's total net worth. Assuming you are not about to die, that You're prepared to take time to cash out such assets, and again that you have low debt and live in a Western democracy. Table 2. Wealth measured by total assets. True net worth. Euro 1 millionaire to Euro 2 million. The comfortable poor, Euro 2 million to Euro 5 million is the comfortably off, Euro 5 million to Euro 15 million is the comfortably wealthy, Euro 15 million to Euro 40 million is the lesser rich, Euro 40 million to Euro 75 million is the comfortably rich, Euro 75 million to Euro 100 million the rich, Euro 100 million to 200 million the seriously rich, Euro 200 to 400 million the truly rich, Euro 400 to 999 million the filthy rich, over 999 million euro super rich. Note to the table 2. The importance of taxation upon assets in such a table cannot be underestimated. In certain circumstances, the true net worth of an individual or family might be reduced by as much as half if little or no tax planning has been undertaken. So, how rich do you want to be? The usual answer is rich enough to be happy. But riches do not come for happiness. I have lost count of the number of friends, lovers, and acquaintances I have told teas to, especially this when I fast pass 7 knots of cash in hand. I don't bother anymore. The incredulous look on their faces is always the same. What they are really thinking is, well, maybe you are not happy with all that dough, Felix, but I know that I would be just try me. Still, let me repeat it one more time. Becoming rich does not guarantee happiness. In fact, it is almost certain to impose the opposite condition. If not from the stresses and strains of protecting it, then from the guilt that inevitably accompanies its arrival. Even leaving any moral dimensions, heaven, camels, and the eyes of needles out of the equation, consider at least the wise sentiments of the author James Baldwin in his book Nobody Knows My Name, in which he concluded, money, it turned out, was exactly like sex. You thought of nothing else if you didn't have it, and thought of other things if you did. But let's face it, you didn't buy this book to be happy, you bought it in the hope that it would provide pointers to become rich. According to my tables of wealth, rich starts at a total assets of value 15 to 40 million, also known as the lesser rich. So that's where we are aiming for starters anyway. At the top end of the range, you might mind creep into the last few places on the Sunday Times rich list compiled annually by Philip Beresford and his team of researchers. The STRL is the gold standard of league tables of wealthy in Britain. Your rank then would be around 999, equal of the top 1000 richest individuals and families in the UK. As far as the USA is concerned, your Euro 40 million would be placed you nowhere on any major list, except perhaps somewhat high in the kind of esteem I described earlier among family, friends, partners, gold diggers, stockbrokers, bankers, Easter agents. Well, I did say that Euro 15 to 40 million was only a start. Of course, all measurements are arbitrary. They are just an attempt by humans to make some kind of order out of a chaotic universe. In and of themselves, they are meaningless. Quite as valid as measurement of money and as asset value or cash in the bank might be availability on request or lifetime spending totals. If you had no money yourself, but a fairy godmother gave you exactly what you needed whenever you requested it, you would never make the Sunday Times rich list, but you would be the richest person in the world even if you gave everything away each night. And as for lifetime spending totals, as a measurement, I would love to know how much various people have spent in the course of their life, including me. Sadly, I know I am never going to be able to figure out, except for the certainty that I have spent hundreds of millions of dollars. My LSD will have been eye-watering. I also know that because nearly all so-called old money has to be protected from any one generation's carelessness, the family wealth escape, especially property, is tied up in trust funds and entitlements. In effect, many of the children born into this old home are as poor as church mice simply because they cannot get their hands on the loot. They would have surprisingly low LSDs, clean fingernails, and good manners certainly, but low lifetime spending totals. Now, enough baffling but definitions. Let's get down to making some dough. Let's get rich.